Welcome aboard, everybody, to the Thursday edition of Freedom Link here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I'm Joe Joseph. Tonight, my special guest, Mr. Anton Chaitkin of LaRouchePAC.com. And let me give you a little background. Mr. Chaitkin is a historian and investigative reporter. He's written hundreds of articles on the economy and political history and current affairs. His 1985 book, Treason in America, From Aaron Burr to Averell Harriman, documented the takeover of U.S. policy by Blue Bloods from their family archives. He also co-authored with Webster Tarpley, George Bush, The Unauthorized Biography, which is a fantastic read. Everybody, I suggest that you check that out. But I'd like to welcome Anton to the show. Welcome, Mr. Chaitkin.
Thank you, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And you come bearing some rather good news, don't you?
Interesting, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
People in a section of the British establishment, financiers, real oligarchs, have come out publicly saying that the banking system has to go over to a Glass-Steegal standard. In other words, Franklin Roosevelt's law. And they're talking about that for Britain, for Europe, and for the United States. In other words, this is a general system crisis that their empire holdings are dissolving. The crisis is now reached the point where the system, the transatlantic banking system, is finished under its present wild speculative basis.
Mm-hmm.
So people who don't want to lose everything right away have come out. People connected to Rothschild, people in one of the members of the Hambro family. The Financial Times had an editorial July 3rd on this. And this is connected to two things. Number one, the blow-up of the Obama administration and the near-term possibility that Obama sinks towards being ousted from office.
You think?
Right now, before the Democratic convention. The real issue, beyond crimes such as Fast and Furious, war crimes, and so forth, the real basic issue is that you have, with Obama and with Timothy Geithner and with Bernanke, you have a continuous regime of crime involving collusion with the criminals in New York and London who have perpetrated this terrible disaster on the world of the financial parasite regime that has exploded. These three guys, Obama and his friends Geithner and Bernanke, are standing in the way of reinstituting the Glass-Steegal law, which is, it's in Congress. It has 70 co-sponsors. Marcy Kaptur introduced this in 2011. So that needs to be passed. But the crisis that is now blowing up and is hitting this British establishment like a bomb has a spear point of it around the LIBOR rates, LIBOR. These are rates. It's a very specific banking mechanism where they set interest rates within banks to cover interest rate swaps and things that tie municipalities and states and pension funds into hedges that are done in the financial system. The British Serious Fraud Office is now doing a direct investigation of the frauds committed by the banks. I'm talking about banks in Britain such as Barclays, in the U.S. such as Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and so forth. Cities and states are beginning to sue these banks. Hundreds of billions are involved in terms of potential lawsuits. And in order to get to the bottom of how banks were fixing rates and cooking the books to fool regulators or to while they're bribing or whatever they did with regulators. This goes to the heart of the question that the investment bankers who run the system have used the American and other banking systems, the commercial banking systems, as a kind of a toilet to flush their earnings down and end up with in quadrillions of phony debts and so forth. This system has to be ended immediately, and it can be ended immediately by going back to Glass-Steegal, which says that the ordinary commercial banks are not liable for any debts or connections to these derivatives, because those kinds of debts are illegal for a commercial bank under the Glass-Steegal system.
I got you. So, but
we sink this cesspool.
So let me ask you this then: with Glass-Steegal, what you're saying is the savings portion of it, or the traditional banking portion of it, would be immune to the investment side. Is that correct?
People can make private investments with their own money.
Mm-hmm.
They can't use insured deposits to do so. And what's happened since 1999, when Wall Street and London pushed through a repeal of Glass-Steagall, is that regular banks that have people's savings deposits there, which are insured by the U.S. government, those deposits have been diverted into wild speculation, which previously was illegal for regular banks to be involved in. So if you put this firewall back in effect, the weight of a quadrillion in derivatives and related speculations just sinks on its own and doesn't pull down the rest of the system. Now, the reason I think that, and LaRouche has put forward this Glass-Steagall remedy, and it's now being taken up by the British. And some of the British, not the Crown, and not the enemy faction that's at the heart of the empire, but this is really a faction right in the middle of the empire. So it's a devastating situation.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they're acting now is not only that because their system is crashing and they're in danger of losing everything if some kind of sanity is not restored, but because the plan for a massive expansion of war is being blocked by the joint efforts of the Russians and the American military leaders. That's a definite alliance. In fact, that's in effect right now. That Putin has made it clear that the Russians will not stand for military invasion or a spreading of war into Syria in particular right now. And in fact, the Russians have just sent a whole fleet of warships to Syria. American military leaders, especially the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dempsey, are working with the Russians to carry out war avoidance measures, also working with the Chinese. Against that war avoidance, you have the British, you have Obama.
Oh, Mr. Chaitkin, just hold that thought for a second, because we're up against a hard break. Folks, don't go away. This is very important information and things that you're going to need to know as the days progress here. So don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Freedom Link on the Freedom Link at CenturyLink.net. Joe Joseph here, along with my very special guest, Anton Chaitkin of LaRouchePAC.com. And we're talking about reinstituting Glass-Steagall. A very, very important firewall, as Mr. Chaitkin put it, to help protect the consumer, the person that has a bank account, a savings account, from these banksters, these thugs that are going and they're taking it and directing it towards these fraudulent schemes, and just everybody's losing their shirts. And then, of course, Mr. Chaitkin, it falls on, when the banks implode, who does it fall on to rescue them? It's the taxpayer. So that's, of course, another benefit to Glass-Steegal is that, in this instance, the taxpayer isn't going to be on the hook to bail out the banks for these fraudulent investment schemes. Is that correct?
Yes. All the bailouts have to stop, and all of them were useless. The bailouts that were done both by the Treasury and by the Fed, which continue at the present time, this system has crashed. And the issue really is the same as it was in the 19th century when we had a national bank. And that is, do you direct the credit of the country into building up industry, agriculture, science, and employment, productive employment, or do you allow private powers, which are international, to suck out all the credit of the world, our country and other countries, completely destroy advanced industry in the advanced countries, and bring the economy into a crash? It's as simple as that. It's not just protecting consumers and taxpayers. The issue is whether civilization goes ahead to get back into the mode and mood that we had when Kennedy was president, when we were doing advanced industry and infrastructure. That's what we have to resume. Now, I wanted to bring up the point that I was making just before the break about Syria. On the LaRouchePAC.com website, we have a 47-minute video documentary that was just completed called Syria. And it describes in vivid detail the lie that the Syrian government needs to be overthrown because it's massacring its people. And it goes into the background of the foreign forces, including a third force that isn't even the so-called rebels, but an actual third force supported by Saudi Arabia and Qatar with billions and billions of dollars and masses of weapons, that there's a British government, David Cameron, American government, Obama, and Saudi operation to spread war into Syria, through Syria, and eventually get into a confrontation soon with the Russians. That would have been more possible. People should really take a look at this thing, because this goes back to the Saudi players perpetrating 9/11 in the United States. That was based on an arrangement they had with British intelligence, British arms manufacturer BAE, and the British government going back to Margaret Thatcher to use billions in oil revenue, more or less governed jointly by Britain and the Saudis, to spread insurrection and terrorism throughout the Western Asia and the Middle East. That's still going on today, and Obama is helping to perpetrate that by people like Susan Rice and now, unfortunately, Clinton and so forth, spreading this garbage that you have to overthrow and assassinate leader after leader in the name of protecting citizens. This is a big lie. This is Hitler stuff,
right?
Where you say we have to go and cause wars that kill millions of people or hundreds of thousands at a time, and spread it toward more and more towards a war with Russia and China in order to protect the people of each country that we're devastating. This is insane. And that whole drive to spread the war into Syria and Iran is currently being blocked, as I said, by the Russians and by some of the actions by U.S. military leaders led by Dempsey. So this brings us back to the question that people have to really get involved with, which is get Glass-Steegal passed.
Yes.
Get Obama, pull the plug on Barack Obama before the Democratic convention in September. Well, we're having once a week mass distribution of leaflets in Washington, D.C. on the streets from LaRouchePAC. And if you go on the website, you'll see a report on this where we're intersecting Congress, we're intersecting the mood of the people that are in D.C. and from around the country, that they're giving us tremendous encouragement now to carry this initiative out.
That's right, and folks, if you go to LaRouchePAC.com, Mr. LaRouche himself actually put out a little explanation as to what is going on with Britain and Glass-Steegal. So go to LaRouchePAC.com and check that out. Now, a question for you.
Yeah.
If they pursue military action in Syria in any way, shape, or form, and they do not go for a formal declaration of war from Congress, how serious, number one, do you think that Walter Jones is in bringing forth impeachment, articles of impeachment against Obama? And second, how successful do you think that would be if he goes forward with that and is able to bring them about?
I think that first of all, you have to recognize that the fighting is already taking place.
Right.
So there is war in Syria on a certain level. There's massacres perpetrated by the side that is being encouraged.
Right, we're funding them and arming them and the whole nine.
But I think that, and Walter Jones has a resolution in there that would, if it were passed, bring about Obama's impeachment, were he to do some war without congressional approval. But I think that more immediately is that this crisis involving both the ongoing war and the collapse and the demand for passing Glass-Steegal to save our country is what will get Obama kicked out. In other words, the crisis is shaping up. People have to understand, tomorrow morning in Washington, D.C., Friday morning, Timothy Geithner is going to be scrambling around. They're scrambling now tonight, throughout the night, between the Treasury Department, which he now heads, and the New York Federal Reserve, which he headed, under Bush. And they are trying to come up with explanations of what was Geithner's role throughout this crisis, going back to 2008, when they had a meeting in the New York Federal Reserve. It was on April 28th, 2008. It was the title of the meeting of the leaders of the New York Federal Reserve under Geithner was called "Fixing LIBOR," LIBOR. In other words, fixing the rates of this internal speculative interest rate. And this is a meeting that was going into the then current activity of rigging these LIBOR rates and also cooking the books.
Right.
So they're going to say, how much do we know about the banks basically stealing trillions and trillions? And how were we involved in making sure that the regulators didn't get in the way? They're going to have to explain that tomorrow morning.
All right, hold that thought. When we come back from break, we'll talk a little bit more about Timothy Geithner and so much more. I mean, this is just unbelievable information, folks. So sit tight, don't go away. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. This is the Freedom Link on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Welcome back, folks. I mean, there's a lot of things coming to a head here in the next couple of days, but there's a lot of history behind this, too. And I'm so glad to have a very, very, very smart, intelligent historian like Mr. Chaitkin from LaRouchePAC.com to come on the broadcast to help us understand this a little bit. And, history kind of shows, first of all, we've been down this road before, with Glass-Steegal. They put that in place to protect us from the shenanigans that bankers typically do when they're given free rein. But what would be a solution to this problem, and especially with national banks? Because there's a lot of people out there that are squeamish when they hear the term national bank. So could you help people understand what you mean when you say that there needs to be a national banking system put into place?
we had a Bank of the United States at the founding of the country, and it was its charter expired in 1811. It was reinstituted by some of the people that had been opposed to the National Bank in the first place, Madison and Monroe and Jefferson. They were all for this now when it came back, and it was destroyed by Andrew Jackson. All of the establishment of the banking system that we have now is behind Andrew Jackson. So there's this horrible marriage in the world of thought between populists and the financier oligarchy. All of them say Andrew Jackson was helping the people, the little people, by destroying the Bank of the United States. In 1913, the British and American financier establishment, getting ready for World War I, set up the so-called Federal Reserve System in the United States under Woodrow Wilson as president. And we've had that since then, a bank controlled for the purpose and intention of the Federal Reserve is exactly opposite to the national bank that we had that was set up by our founders. The purpose and intention of the national bank in the United States, the Bank of the United States, first and second, was to steer the credit of the country into investment in production, into productive activities, into enterprises that would build up the power of production and high-wage activities, including new infrastructure, railroads, canals, iron forges, coal mining, and so forth. The purpose of the Federal Reserve is exactly the opposite, to make sure that the credit resources of the U.S. are blended with and merged with that the credit resources of the entire world, subject to the speculative activities of a clique of bankers who are really insane and who always bring about a crash. We had a crash in the United States after Andrew Jackson did his dirty work on behalf of those financiers to take down the Bank of the United States. Now, his populist managers, starting with Aaron Burr and Martin Van Buren and Roger Taney and John Randolph of Roanoke, various people involved with the British in one way or another. The populism that they herded the public with was based on the rhetoric that we need to have a war of the poor people against the rich people. The rich people are bankers, and the poor people are not. So therefore, if you destroy the bank that is regulating the other banks, you're just destroying rich people who are hurting poor people.
Right. Let me ask you.
It's the same kind of rhetoric that's been used by communists and socialists, and it's now used since Jackson by conservatives in the same way that communists and socialists have used that rhetoric. It's completely divorced from historical reality, because Jackson never represented the interests of the common person, but only set up a situation where the government had no power to interfere with finance and left it all to Wall Street.
I have a question from the chat room, or actually a comment, and I would like you to respond to it, only because I don't have the knowledge with which to respond to it. So let me say, okay, so Mike SLC in the chat room, thank you for the comment, says Andrew Biddle, the owner of the Second Bank of the United States, was intent on reasserting the Crown's control. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, his name was Nicholas Biddle, and he was the president of the Bank of the United States, appointed by James Monroe, who's a great patriot. And Biddle's use of the bank, as documented in the article that I just did, and you can get it at LaRouchePub.com, or call call our number. It's 800-929-7566 and get a free copy. 800-929-7566. The Bank of the United States was used to finance the breakthrough of the United States to become an industrialized country, which the British Empire was intent on stopping. And there was a fight at that time in the 1820s about whether the United States should be allowed to do canals and railroads and iron mines and coal mines and so forth and go west. And the British Empire and the Southern slave owners and the Boston Brahmins said no. And the nationalists, with people like John Quincy Adams and Nicholas Biddle and Matthew Carey and James Monroe, said, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to make the United States an industrial power, and we need a national bank that will make sure that New York speculators are not able, and British bankers are not able to interfere with that. The way that Biddle controlled the currency and gave us a uniform dollar that was useful to the people, used for industrial and productive purposes, was first of all making direct investments in railroads and canals and industrial enterprises and steering credit to them in the private markets. But on the other hand, also, when some speculator in New York, or particularly speculators in Wall Street, would issue private notes saying, you know, this is redeemable in gold, but they hope that no one would redeem them and would just circulate them. They would do huge speculations. When Biddle got those notes in the bank, deposited in the Bank of the United States, if the bankers that were issuing them were doing unsound speculations, not connected to production, his people would go immediately to that banker and present this note to them and say, give us the gold that you say you're going to give. If they were doing investments that were not unsound, that were helping the country, they wouldn't interfere. In other words, this was a regulating of the banks of the country in favor of the people's future. And if you check all rhetoric against Nicholas Biddle, and I'm appealing to the sense of honor of people who are listening to this or people in the chat room or whatever. Check the charges against Biddle, that he's an agent of Britain, that he's an agent of Rothschild, that he's a monster. Check the sources, not only the sources for these claims, but check that anybody has actually ever said the things that are being quoted. I've seen quotations, for example, from Nathan Rothschild from 1811 or sometime later, that are so obviously fabricated. And you don't have to be an expert in history to see how stupid this stuff is. Where imagine somebody like Nathan Rothschild, who's this British banker involved with intelligence with the British Crown and so forth. He's a real, in my view, a real hoodlum. Imagine him saying in public that I want to control and fool the American people. Do you think he would say something like that?
No.
It's too stupid.
Right, it would be idiocy, right?
Of course. So and then you see these things. There's often such things attributed to Abraham Lincoln.
Right, hold that thought. When we come back, last segment of hour number one, folks. Boy, it flies when you have such a good guest like Anton Chaitkin. LaRouchePAC.com. Fantastic guest, extremely knowledgeable, if you can't tell already. And we're talking about national banks. And where do we go from here, Mr. Chaitkin? It's the last segment, so let's jam in as much as we can.
Well, I'd like to relate this to the issue of war and peace.
Sure.
The Federal Reserve Bank was foisted on the American people in 1913 in preparation for the U.S. entering a century of world war, which really hasn't stopped. When we had national banking, we had no wars. And it's as simple as that. We had a peaceful development of our own country, minding our own business, and the idea of the United States, the credit of the United States was golden in the world. People thought this is going to be paradise because America is making inventions rapidly, and they have a financial system that's totally opposite to the British. We should do that. Our idea of national banking and national control over a credit system spread to other countries. It spread to Germany for a while under Bismarck. It spread to Japan for a while when we helped them get a new government in 1869. It was starting to spread into Russia under Alexander II, the Tsar, and other countries. Ireland and even in India, other people were picking this American system. This is the American system, not the British.
Right, and this is the national banking system
right.
you're talking about. Pre-Federal Reserve.
But so the Federal Reserve was instituted under the guidance of the Bank of England. And at that time, the British strategy was to have a perpetual war and involve the United States in that, and to somehow get the American people to drop their characteristic idea of progress. That's what made America. It was the idea of progress, that we had a commitment to change the world by developing new inventions, new powers over nature. I don't mean video games and just communication devices. That's not really new inventions. I'm talking about power. I'm talking about creating electricity from scratch. There was no public electricity. I'm talking about machines to reshape the earth and to build cities and to bring the standard of living up and to support a rapidly growing population. This kind of thing is needed throughout the world. That's the real issue. Our system, which is based on national sovereignty, national control over credit. It's a credit system, not a money system. Money has no rights. People have the rights to have progress. And that progress is intimately connected to national sovereignty. So now we have this really interesting situation that we were talking about at the beginning of this program, where bankers and officials in the heart of the British Empire, what's left of it, that's the financial center of the world still, London, have come out over the past week for putting a firewall called Glass-Steegal, which we used to have as a law in the United States, back into effect in the USA and in England and elsewhere to stop the imminent collapse of the entirety of the banking system of the transatlantic world. And this is very interesting because their reason for doing this is not because they hate their imperial system. They're trying to save it, but the craziness of that empire is inherent in it. It's an unworkable system over the long term. You can't simply rob people and be a parasite and use your power to stop people from making advances in wealth production, which is what the empire is all about. It doesn't create wealth. It sucks the wealth out of nations that developed wealth by national greatness, which these guys have nothing to do with. So they reach this terrible contradiction. And the saner people, not the Tony Blairs of the world, but the saner people in England are now coming out for Glass-Steegal. And they're confronted with the fact that the stooge of the insane people leading Britain, named Barack Obama, is blocking the institution of Glass-Steegal in the United States. It's very funny that he's doing that, and that mostly Democrats have supported Glass-Steegal coming back in the United States.
Yeah, very interesting.
So there's an immediate conflict between Obama and the poor people of the USA, including the black people, and the poor people of the world, which is 9/10 of the world. His actions for spreading war and for protecting the worst gangsters and bailing them out in the financial system is genocide, is crimes that are worthy of his immediate ouster. Having said that, just because it's the right thing to do or moral doesn't get it done. What does get it done is when a crisis hits so hard as this LIBOR crisis is hitting right now with Geithner and Bernanke and Obama, all three of them in the soup, as people will see tomorrow morning, and as this crisis spreads. So I would appeal to people to help us get to the LaRouchePAC website. Call us at that number I gave it, at 800-929-7566.
Mm-hmm.
Get my article. I'll send it to you for free, Anton Chaitkin. But help us distribute the flyers, because we want to get this Glass-Steegal passed now. We have to prevent the complete and utter destruction of our civilization. If we don't get back to the use of credit for production, for jobs, in private enterprise and in terms of government funding for projects, both, that's what the credit system is about. That the entire society is dedicated to enterprises of production. And that's what we have to get back to. We don't do that now. Most people in the United States do not produce anything. They're not, in a sense, they're not allowed to. Kids don't know anything about production. They're not taught anything about that in school. People haven't experienced progress in this country for a whole generation. Obama symbolizes that by shutting down the manned space program and things like that. And getting elected in the first place, I would say, by a bunch of dope money coming in through Soros, that I would estimate seriously has something to do with this gun running into Mexico. I think that whole business of Fast and Furious is a lot more serious than people really understand, because you have a system of dope financing and money laundering and weapons trafficking that is intimately connected with this financial system, this dirty, filthy, black economy called the present financial system.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming to an end. So I think Obama can go. I would like to see him out of office before the Democratic convention.
Yeah, me too.
To blow up, and then we have a new ballgame, because these candidates are useless. Right?
They are all useless. There's a good saying, Mr. Chaitkin, that if voting actually changed something, they'd make it illegal. And in
well, they did make it illegal in some countries, obviously. So, let's make voting mean something by getting this changed now.
Absolutely. And I just want to let you know, I got a little message. My brother, who he woke up about a month ago, started researching this kind of stuff and found out that the world's a really evil, rotten place. He just said, wow, what an amazing guest. So I just wanted to throw that out to you. But in the minute or so that we have left, please go ahead and plug your websites, phone numbers, anything that you want to put out there for the people to know.
Yeah, I have just written an article. It's the America's Industrial Revolution that Andrew Jackson sought to destroy. And it's about the beautiful, beautiful American nationalists who built up this country as a community of men of genius, and in the 1820s and 30s. And it really gets to the soul of the American founders, which is a beautiful story, I believe. It's on the LaRouchePub.com website. That's for the magazine Executive Intelligence Review. I'm the history editor there. And you can go on LaRouchePAC.com to look at the Syria documentary that I was talking about earlier, 47-minute fantastic documentary. Call us at 800-929-7566. 800-929-7566. 800-929-7566. And get, you can print out some of these leaflets and get them out. Get in touch with us. Call us up and have some fun. We're really overturning the card table now, and the stakes could not be higher.
Right. Mr. Chaitkin, we're out of time, so I'd like to thank you for being on the broadcast tonight, and hope to have you back real soon so we can continue this conversation.
Great.
Folks, hour number 1 is done. Hour number 2 is on the way. When we come back, we'll join, Dr. Carpenter will join me for hour number 2 to talk about the FDA and how they raided her office. We'll be right back after.